Hello, it's Daryl here. We have a good show for you today. We're going to be talking about the USA's performance against Portugal, which featured some really encouraging signs from some really talented young players. All of that to look forward to. We're also going to talk about Bruce Arena's appearance in the Fox Sports studio. We're going to talk about Christian Pulisic and his post for the Players Tribune and his thoughts about young players getting opportunities in Major League Soccer. And even though I tried to avoid it, Taylor forced me into talking about the possibility of an NIT-style tournament for the US and Italy and the Netherlands and so on. Today's episode is sponsored by Fucci, spelled Futchi. Fucci make the engineered soccer rebounder. It's not just a regular rebounder, it's also a game you can play. You play the ball against the Fucci rebounder, it bounces back, you have to land it within a court, so it's kind of like squash, and then your opponent attempts to return it. Taylor and I have played Fucci for hours and hours. It is great fun. If you go on YouTube, I'll link to it in the show notes. If you go on YouTube, there's lots of video of Taylor versus Daryl. It gets really competitive, but it was good fun as well. Right now, you can use the discount code TSS2017, TSS2017, to get $20.17 off of a Fucci rebounder. That's in addition to the current discount that's already happening at playfucci.com. Perfect Christmas present. Perfect Christmas present. The link will be in the show notes. The code again is TSS2017 for $20.17 off. Thank you to Fucci for sponsoring today's episode. Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove. Sitting across the table from me is the only member of the Total Soccer Show who can pronounce Louisville correctly. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. You did very well. I think that might have been it. Yeah, Louisville. Yeah.
Yeah, close enough, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you just pretend the S isn't there and that the I is an ER.
Sure. Why not? That makes sense, I think.
But congrats to Louisville.
Absolutely.
For winning USL Cup.
Yeah.
The USL Cup? USL Cup.
I'm going to say the USL Cup.
Okay.
Why not? We'll add an article in there. But I guess they get to determine since they're now champions. That's how that works. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I've got to be honest, I didn't watch it, but I did follow some Twitter updates. I was sort of tweeting away and trying to do some work at the same time, and I kept getting updates and some text messages from my co-host who was paying attention.
Well, kind of. I was like cooking stuff in the kitchen, cleaning, doing laundry, all that good stuff, and I was sort of like looking for something to watch. And I was like, meanwhile, following the updates of that game, and then slowly was like, oh, right, it's on Watch ESPN. Why am I not watching this game? That would be easier. So it was sort of like paying attention to it as it was happening. Certainly near the end of the game, especially when Cameron Lancaster scored the game winner in the 86th.
A big header.
I think I texted you a header that Andy Carroll would have been proud of. Because it really was like he hangs in the air.
Well, that's a trick. It's a trick statement because Andy Carroll's proud of every header.
This is true. But it's one of those like hangs in the air, has a person
Cameron Lancaster English as well? I'm pretty sure he is.
I mean, with that name, it seems like it's a decent shout. I'm not sure. I know he's scored plenty against the kickers in seasons past. Mm-hmm. But he has a guy hanging on him. He gets up in the air. He hangs in the air. And he does that sort of ball coming in from the right, whipped in, and he heads it back across that sort of looping header that drops into the goal in the side netting. It's a great goal and a good win for Louisville. That went until like the 97th or 8th minute, I think. Even though it was like 4 minutes added on. It just kept going, kept being more dramatic.
And commiserations to the Swope Park Buffalo Bills.
Mm-hmm.
Look at me making NFL jokes.
That's good of you. That's good of you.
So, yeah, seriously, congratulations to Louisville and to all their fans. Mm-hmm. But we're not here to talk about USL Cup. We're here to talk about the friendly that went down in Portugal today. Portugal won. US men's national team, the US national team, won.
Yep.
US took the lead in the 20-something minute. 21st minute from Weston McKennie. And Portugal equalised. I've forgotten his name, but it was their left back. Mm-hmm. But the thing we'll all remember is that his cross/shot slipped through all of Ethan Horvath. I was going to say fingers, but it really slipped through his whole body.
Yeah. Mostly between his legs, but it was bad. It was bad.
It was. Maybe we'll get to that later. I don't want to dwell on it too much.
Nope. Your headphones do. That's why they won't let your paper pick up. No, I mean, I don't want to.
I was pulling out my Portugal lineup here, so I don't make that mistake again.
Other than that, I do have some sympathy for him. But I'll instead focus on the fact that I spent the entire game trying to remember that it was Antunes because I kept wanting to be like Altuna, I think it is, and that's not what his name was.
So should we start with, before we maybe get into the goals, we'll maybe do those in a bit more detail, What did we make of the US performance?
I thought you were going to have a John Maddenism right there. I really thought you were going to go with, should we start at the beginning? I was really excited. I thought it was about as good as we could have hoped for. I think it was a reminder.
I can't tell if that's positive or negative.
Well, it's because no matter how good it was, it still would have been tinged with awe. And that's exactly what happened. That when McKennie scored that first goal, you jumped up and cheered. I don't think I moved or made a noise, and then you kind of quietly sat back down. Yeah. And not because you were like, oh, should we not be cheering? It was just more so because it's like, oh, yeah, we scored. He might go. Oh, no. He's not going.
I kind of realized halfway through that I really had a vision of oh, this could have been happening in Russia next summer. Instead, it's just happening here.
Yes. Yeah. And so with that said, there was definitely that element of it's still very sad, and it's definitely going to feel that way until the World Cup starts. It was a good game, and I think it was an interesting game to watch from the standpoint of I'm not willing to give Dave Sarachan much credit for what happened on the field. Certainly he sent the team out, he picked the lineup and everything, but I can't imagine that he had the authority and backing of maybe I'll be the manager to really drill people on how I want you to do this and how I want you to do that.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not really willing to speculate on that, but I will say from what I saw, and if you want to start at the beginning in a John Madden way, that there was definitely a strategy and a game plan that 100% worked and was executed. And where does that start if not with the acting head coach?
All right, that's fair. Then let me rephrase to say that I think it's basically that say after Arena gets or resigns, not fired. Let's say they had appointed Tab Ramos and it's Tab Ramos in charge. I am probably...
He would have played this formation, I think.
Probably, and I'm more inclined to say okay, we can see the basics of it. It's basically what happened when Bruce Arena was appointed after Jurgen Klinsmann. That we were maybe it was some of the stuff that was maybe already happening. I don't think it was, but we were probably more inclined to give U.S. benefit of the doubt and Bruce Arena because now there's a new manager in there. And I think it's just because it's Dave Sarachan as the placeholder, sort of interim acting head coach, whatever.
That's the most recent U.S. soccer headline.
That's vacant on U.S. Soccer's website is all I'm saying. It's just sort of no, I think I'm going to focus more on the players rather than what the coaches might have done.
Well, so here's why I liked what I saw, especially those first 3-4 minutes, is that this was the
first 2.5 minutes, I believe.
The US style that I've been asking for, which is you get numbers in midfield and you have guys going after the ball. And it's not a big, massive Man City style press. It's kind of, we're going to come after you, but in a way that is still with some security.
I think it's a sustainable press for international soccer.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and it's high pressure, high intensity. And I think the US, turned the ball over. Sorry, the US forced Portugal to turn the ball over. Portugal take kickoff. US has the ball back and has won a free kick in literally 5 seconds. Yeah, Kellyn Acosta wins it back with some help from Tyler Adams. Acosta gets fouled. US has a free kick. I mean, that kept happening.
I mean, it really was inside the first 2.5 minutes. I think we counted at least 4, maybe 5 instances in which the United States put somebody under pressure and either forced a bad pass or a long ball, or just the player turned the ball over. Kellyn Acosta had 2 sort of bad shots off of that, but it was the United States causing problems for Portugal and then creating opportunities off of those problems.
And did you count 4 turnovers in 2.5 minutes?
4 or 5. I can't remember what the specific number was.
Really good stuff from the US. And but
that's not an exaggeration. It really was. And yes, it was really good stuff. But it really was this guy steps, he forces that pass back. This guy stepping, that long ball gets intercepted. And then this guy steps and he wins the ball. It really was in those first 2.5 minutes. You got an idea of, okay, we're being ruthless and we're aggressive.
It looked like the US under-20s. And it looked a little bit like the US under-17s. They kind of have played the same style where you have one defensive midfielder, and in this case it was Danny Williams was the one, and then 2 central midfielders ahead of him who are not playmakers. They're both number 8s in a way. This is the reason George Acosta couldn't get a start or couldn't get many starts for the US under-17s. It's because the style of the US, and it may be our national style now, is to have 2 aggressive, hard-working guys who can win the ball back but then can do something with it when they do get the ball. But there's no pure playmaker there instead.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. But I just still think it was this team... Strangely,
I'm just sure Andrew Carlton may be the exception to that when he plays centrally, but not for the U20s.
But I feel like this team had so little pressure on them at the same time because they're so there's not much to play for. It's not like they're playing themselves into contention for the World Cup. That it really was to see them go out and work as hard as they did was very exciting, and you did have those moments of okay, I see what we're doing. But by the same token, it was a little bit if you kept going to the same restaurant and every time they brought you out the wrong food, and then it was cold, and then no, this isn't even cooked, and then you went to a new restaurant and they made you a decent food plate that was brought out on time and was the right order, you'd be like, "What? This is the best restaurant ever!" Like I did have those moments of like, "Wait, that didn't happen before. This is so exciting! Oh my goodness,
So
I missed this."
This US performance is the competent restaurant where you're just amazed that they got your order right.
Pretty much.
I said no pickle, and it came with no pickle.
I mean, even look at that rings home for you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Even looking at the lineup, I mean, really, like there was like maybe a couple things that we would have liked to have seen, but overall, it really was like, okay, yeah, this is what I want to see. Like, I'm good with this.
So here's when I saw the lineup. I think I said on the last show I wanted the 4-1-4, and it made sense going up against a quality opponent in Portugal, even with players missing. Portugal quality team. We needed numbers in midfield, and we needed a sort of something that we could defend and counter, right? Yep. And 4-1-4-1 is what I wanted, but I wanted Tyler Adams in central midfield, and I didn't want a striker, Juan Agudelo, at left mid. Because what we got, if anyone hasn't seen this, because there's a chance that people are listening to this didn't watch the game because it was on a Tuesday afternoon. It was Danny Williams defensive midfield, Weston McKennie and Kellen Acosta ahead of him as the central midfielders, and then the wide players were Tyler Adams at right mid, which I wasn't happy with to start with. I'm much happier after watching the game, and Juan Agudelo centre forward at left midfield, and then CJ Sapong up top. More impressed with how that played out than how I thought it would.
I'm with you on that one, because I think anytime, again, because of what's happened in the past, anytime we have a forward who's suddenly playing out wide, we have this sort of like, that's maybe not what we want to see. That's putting a person who doesn't quite know what they're doing into a space where now you're asking them to do something. I
know Agudelo has played all over the place for New England, so maybe this isn't all that new to him, but he still kind of absolutely did all the tracking back midfieldery jobs that he had to do and managed to get involved in the attack. So yeah, it completely worked for me.
And I think, and I want to be clear here, like he absolutely deserves credit because he did exactly what was needed. He did a really good job of covering space and dropping back and blocking off angles and winning the ball back and playing smart. But I also think a big part of that was that he had people around him who were organized and talking. I thought Danny Williams kept people organized, kept making sure that spaces were covered, that people were being tracked. Exactly. But I think John Brooks and Matt Miazga did the same. I felt like they did a really nice job of always making sure that somebody was dropping in. We saw a couple times, sometimes to the U.S.'s detriment, sometimes not, that like Eric Lehigh might try to step and somebody would call him back, or DeAndre Yedlin would step a bit too aggressively and somebody would call him back. It felt like everybody knew that they were responsible both for their play, but also the play of those around them. And because of that, there was a lot more accountability.
Accountability buddies.
There you go. It's necessary when you're playing the reigning European champions.
Right. Well, some of the reigning European champions.
Nope, this is them. We're co-champions now. Matt Doyle made that point.
So one thing, did it? Oh, because we tied, we're co-champions of Europe.
Yep, that's how it works.
Can we get there? If we'd won, did we get their World Cup place?
I mean, that's what I would hope. I feel like that's the gentlemanly thing to do. I don't know if they would have honored that
Portugal should
agreement.
just step aside.
I don't know what we could offer them in exchange. You can have our Gold Cup spot if you win. You're welcome.
They're not negotiating that.
Probably not.
So should we talk about Weston McKennie's goal?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, great finish, right? If we're working backwards from the finish, we watched this a couple of times to make sure it wasn't like a scuffed shot that accidentally went inside the near post. He definitely kind of, as he approaches the keeper, just sees that little inside the near post thing. And he's almost like opening his body up a little bit as if he's going to go far post, but then goes inside the near post.
Yes.
Good finish, especially from a defensive midfielder.
Absolutely. And I think that's a key point because it's a defensive midfielder. It's not an attacking midfielder or a forward who's doing some step overs and totally burns the defender and then just rockets it into the far corner. What I think it is a player who's playing consistently in the Bundesliga and has that sort of like poise on the ball.
He did have a lot of poise throughout the game, right? There's a lot of times when he would sort of bring a ball down, play it quickly, or have a nice little layoff. Yeah, there's a lot of good Weston McKennie moments that weren't as attention-grabbing as the goal.
So then you look at this goal and he basically gets played the ball. We'll talk more about who played him the ball in a second. But he's 1v1 with Ricardo Ferreira. And then it's not a lot of flash. It's not he does a bunch of step overs and then burst of speed. It's just sort of he's on the ball, he's calm, he waits and waits and waits and picks his moments. And then he does that little outside of the foot cut. Ferreira bites, and then he calmly finishes it into the near post. And it just felt like this guy is getting consistent minutes and thus backs himself and has that confidence that in that moment where there's extreme pressure, he can still kind of execute flawlessly.
So here's the
semi-flawlessly.
Speaking of executing flawlessly, though, the most important thing to me about this goal is how we win the ball back.
Let's talk about
and how it starts. It's Weston McKennie who wins the ball back from Portugal to start the move that he is then able to finish. And what he does is he's doing the thing that the US has done for the first 20 minutes, which is to go and pressure Portugal, but not in an all-in, like last roll of the dice, Hail Mary, then they'll beat you over the top type way, in a really clever way. And you can see, if you watch this, Weston McKennie is marking his guy, I can't remember who his guy is, but then Ricardo Ferreira, the centre-back, is trying to bring the ball out, and he sees the passing lane that the Ferreira's going for, and McKennie just shades across to close down that passing lane, but Ferreira still gambles anyway. That's how McKennie wins the ball back. And it really, alarm bells went off in my head of like, I've been wanting to see this US team with Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie going after people and just being aggressive and tenacious and winning the ball back that way. But it made me realise that part of doing that is also being smart, reading the game, closing down channels, and that's exactly what McKennie did. That's what got me as excited as the goal.
So I agree with you completely. All of that work from McKennie was excellent, but I want to also focus on another guy who probably isn't going to get talked about very much other than like, oh yeah, he had a good game. That was nice to see. It's CJ Sapong.
Yeah,
and
centre forward CJ Sapong.
Yes,
yeah.
and he's the one who has the assist.
Everyone's third choice to start this game at centre forward.
Basically.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about him briefly, but it was also...
Yeah, but we went Agudelo or maybe Dwyer, or I guess maybe CJ Sapong.
And I think it was sort of, we defaulted to what we'd heard about him, because we haven't seen much Philadelphia Union. I mean, you know, much to our chagrin. But we kind of thought like, oh, he's the bigger guy. He's going to be up top. He is the leading American goal scorer, but whatever.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't really
Target
have much.
man, hold it up, etc.
And so he was the one who plays the ball in, but even in this sequence, he's also the one who's doing a lot of the thankless running to put people under pressure, to run at that center back, but also not just run and try to put him under pressure.
So before McKennie picks it off, it's Sapong putting Ferreira under pressure as he plays that pass,
yes,
right? Yeah.
But it's also putting him under pressure in a very smart way, where it's not just, I'm going to run at you, Dale Grove, as hard as I can, and you pass to the next guy, and then I run at that guy as hard as I can. It's, say I run at you and you make that pass to the right center back, I might go pressure him, but I'm going to do so in a way where I'm constantly making sure that he can't just play it right back to you.
Angles.
And you slowly force them in, and that's what Sapong did really well here. And then obviously he does really well to play that ball in from McKennie.
Yep.
And that's what he was kind of doing this entire
outside the
game.
foot little pass. He gets the assist on McKennie's goal.
Does.
I mean, so there you go.
So I was really pleased with what I saw from CJ Sapong. It was good running. It was good hard work. It was very thankless work at times, but I think in the end he was probably justified a January call-up.
Yes, absolutely. I think we'll definitely see him in January when we have the January camp once again.
Yeah.
I want to focus a little more on this energy in midfield.
Sure.
I really feel like with Acosta and McKennie centrally and Adams as the right mid, Dave Sarachan essentially was sort of like, all right, I want to play all these young, exciting players, and I'm just going to find a way to get them all on the field at the same time.
Yep.
And the compromise that was made was Tyler Adams at right mid instead of centre mid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can also see that from a standpoint of, we talked about like the attacking play of their fullbacks and how Tyler Adams can roam and destroy. Yeah. And so I can see how Tyler Adams, who we've talked about, like maybe we put him as a fullback if we need to put him in somewhere. I could see why you'd put him out wide, but also make sure that he knows he needs to track back, not get caught inside too often. He did a couple times at the very beginning.
He was extra tenacious, especially early on, and I think, he chased all over the field in a way that was slightly undisciplined for a right midfielder.
Yeah.
He found himself at left mid a couple of times, but he was always very quick to get back in position as well.
But I can see why, if you're Dave Sarachan, you would say, let's put him out there and maybe he can help with the overlapping runs and just make sure we've got some pace and tenacity out there.
And I think nothing major came of it, but I always got kind of excited when when Yedlin overlapped Tyler Adams, I could kind of see the future and wow, these two combining, it's a lot of pace and it's a lot of, not that DeAndre Yedlin's not smart, but Tyler Adams definitely sort of sees space in a way that that Yedlin doesn't. You know what I'm saying? So with Yedlin's pace and Adams' bit of pace and lots of sort of spatial awareness, I think that's a dangerous combo.
I would say that's a fair statement. I would say, though, that you're giving, I feel like, a lot of credit to the three that you've already talked about. So McKennie and Acosta and Tyler Adams. I would say a huge part of this was Danny Williams.
Yes.
Not just because
he was behind them the whole time, sort of slightly orchestrating the whole thing, but also giving them a sort of safety net because they could pressure, and if anything comes through, then Danny Williams is there to eat it up.
Well, that's part of it, certainly, and I think he did that really well. But I also felt like there were times when, and this was the first game, you and I have been very much, if you have to make it like one way or the other, I'd say we were pro Bradley.
Yeah.
And have been pro Bradley. And this
with caveats and criticisms, but mostly we would always start him. Yeah.
And I would say this was the first time that I've seen, mostly because we don't see other people playing center midfield for the United States very often. It was definitely the first time when I was like, okay. Like, I can see aspects of why people were frustrated because, yes, Danny Williams did a lot of what we've seen Michael Bradley do, but he also stepped at times in a way that I don't think Michael Bradley would have. I think Bradley is very concerned with
hold the space,
yep. Keep everybody around you, make sure that
he'd be a good protester.
Yeah, exactly. But what you need sometimes is somebody to step forward.
Occupied defensive midfield.
Sure. And Danny Williams, at times, I felt like read the play, saw that guy's going to get the ball, and there's nobody within 10 yards of him, so I'm going to leave the space and hope that somebody will fill it. Most of the times, U.S. players did. Sometimes they didn't. But I'd rather have him step to the guy who otherwise is going to turn, have nobody on him, and either have basically the calmness on the ball to play a 40-yard ball over the top, or to pick his time and make somebody come to him. Somebody else is open, you play that ball. Now somebody else has to cover, and suddenly it's this weird domino effect.
Yep.
I felt like Danny Williams had the perfect combination of shield, but then also step and stab.
Yeah, I think he got the balance just right of you often saw him in the number 6 spot, occupying that spot. But yeah, like you said, you then equally often saw him make the decision to go cause trouble, go pressure people.
Yes.
And yeah, he got the balance just right in a way that made me think maybe we could have done with him for the last few months.
I mean,
because Adams and McKennie, you can argue, they're teenagers, and so it's a tougher call-up for World Cup qualifiers. Danny Williams is 26 or 28? I think he's 28, and he's played for the US plenty of times before. There was no reason not to pick him over the last few months, unless it was injuries or something else.
No, and I think that's where, and we'll talk about Bruce Arena in a little bit, but
he's on the board, right, as a topic for later.
Yeah, it felt a little bit like he kind of knew who his top 3 center midfielders were going to be, and so it was like, that's who it's going to be. Maybe I'll experiment later, but right now I'm going to stick with Bradley, Acosta, and McCarty, and that was going to be it. And so I'm guessing that's why Bruce Arena didn't call him in, but I feel like when we were calling it before, I think my EPL prediction was that Danny Williams would get a call up to the September World Cup qualifiers or friendlies or whatever they were.
Can we go back and make that happen?
I mean, I wish we had, because I think it would have been very important for the U.S., especially against Trinidad and Tobago. Anyway, but I think, but to your point, so you can understand, maybe Danny Williams should have gotten called in. You can understand why maybe Adams and McKennie were a bit too soon. But even then, you look at Matt Miazga, who did start this game alongside John Brooks. John Brooks was injured for...
Both did well, I want to say.
I mean, yeah. I thought so. I thought Matt Miazga, I don't think had any moments where I was like, oh boy, that's troubling. I think the only really foot he put wrong was when he clipped a Portuguese defender as John Brooks scored off of a corner, but then it was called back. I can't tell if he clipped him or shoved him, but either way, it was basically John Brooks scored, and then the goal was disallowed because Matt Miazga had been deemed to have interfered.
Yep.
Outside of that, I thought he did well, and then when John Brooks was replaced by Cameron Carter-Vickers at halftime, I thought CCV did just fine, almost had a goal that hit the post.
Yeah, it was definitely CCV and not Weston McKennie, right? The cameraman got it wrong, essentially.
Yeah. And so, in the end, what I feel like that speaks to is, again, I'm not saying Cameron Carter-Vickers should have been starting, obviously, in World Cup qualifying. He's very young. That's
Are you about to say they were more ready than maybe people thought?
They were more ready, but it was also, when you pause and think about it, if you're going to rotate and have different people coming in, then rotate and have different people coming in. But calling the same 25 to 26 players in every single time and claiming that's rotation, when there's all these guys that probably could have come in and at least
would have brought some energy based on what we saw today.
And at least would have pushed other players to realize, there's somebody challenging me from my spot. And at the end of the day, not to kick a horse when it's down, because I'm assuming it is still down, but I mean, I still believe that Cameron Carter-Vickers probably would have done a better job than Omar Gonzalez.
Yeah, especially in that Trinidad game.
Yeah,
right? Yeah, you can't get much worse than that.
So, with all that said, I think a big part of this, we're kind of talking about all the positives the United States had, because it's difficult to say, but then there was that one moment, because obviously this finishes 1-1.
Then there was that one moment.
But really, we went back and watched, and there are certainly little things that you can pull out about, he stepped and that left this player, and we can go through those. But really, at the end of the day, it is a volley from a ridiculous angle that is probably a cross that goes through Ethan Horvath's legs and into the goal. That's what makes it 1-1.
That is what makes it 1-1. Yeah. Okay. So maybe let's go with the build-up to the goal, mostly because I just want to put off talking about Ethan Horvath just for a minute, if we can. It's the US presses, as it has been doing, right? Quite high up the field. And when we rewatched it, I thought maybe that was where it broke down, we did it wrong and Portugal played through us. But actually, we end up forcing Portugal to kick long. I think from their goalkeeper, maybe. They have to kick it deep, and it's Guedes, right? Number 7, Guedes, who I was really impressed with all night. We picked him out as kind of a danger man for the game. He does a very good job of meeting the ball and controlling it at midfield, and then it's like a 50-50 battle with Guedes and Danny Williams. When we rewatched it, because I thought Guedes schooled him at midfield and then got away from him.
Yeah.
Williams does really well, right? He sort of pressures him first, then he's doesn't go overly aggressive, smart. You pointed out he gets goal side of him quickly. Then he gets a second tackle, and he actually does get a tackle and gets his foot to the ball. But then Guedes is just maybe a little bit stronger, a little more on balance, and comes away with the ball.
Yeah.
But even then, the US manages to cycle back quickly and get numbers behind the ball. So there's actually no huge defensive breakdown that causes this goal.
No, I mean, and then like we talked about this off air and a little bit previously, but it's like Eric Lehigh drops off because he's not sure if he's supposed to be pushed up high or dropping the right winger who I think is pressed forward.
And this is why number 8, Bruno Fernandes, he has time to play the sort of that Michael Bradley-esque crossfield diagonal ball to Antunes, the left back, number 5, as he overlaps. But it's a small mistake and it shouldn't be enough to cost the US a goal.
And it's also a mistake in which it's not like, what is he doing? Why is he just running away? It's in which you can sort of see like, oh, okay, I get why you would do that.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just a little bit more fine-tuned.
There was a right winger, it might have been Bruma, there was a right winger who was loose and had to be marked, and so Lehigh dropped to mark him, and so therefore Fernandes had a bit more space than you would have wanted to have, so he could play that crossfield ball.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then it's basically the one-time volley that I think, as I said, is a cross. Even though there's only like one Portuguese player in the box, there's one who's about to come into it as well.
Yeah. I'm wrong, Bruma it was Bruma who was in the box, so the right winger was someone else.
I think it was Gelson Martins.
Okay.
But it's basically, like, it's still the United States, like, when that ball comes in, we freeze-framed it, and it was like, this should not be a goal. They've got, like, a good line. They've kept the line tight. There's 4 players in the box. They're all in the right position to be able to deal with it. In the end, it's Ethan Horvath with the mistake. And this is where I think you and I disagree a little bit, maybe. We haven't talked about this, but I feel like it's better to be angry at Ethan Horvath and rightfully say, like, that is a terrible mistake, and that's not something you can do when you're playing for the national team. And I say that only because it reminds me of, like, when you messed up and your parents did the, like, I'm not disappointed, or I'm not angry, I'm disappointed. Like, I feel like when you've messed up that badly, you want everyone to be angry because it implies that, like, he's so good. How could he do this? This is such a stupid mistake. Versus like, oh, it's okay, buddy. Don't worry. We don't really want you to play anymore,
I know,
but it's fine.
On the broadcast, we're big fans of Stu Holden's commentary, right? I noticed on the broadcast that Holden was very careful not to criticise him too much and to sort of be very gentle with him. And I think that is part of it's the weirdness of the moment, right? Where we have young players taking their first, or in Horvath's case, second or third step in international soccer. And we're all just being a bit kid gloves and like don't want to... I mean, if we did a show where we're just going like all in on Horvath and like pointing out all his flaws, that's probably not good for him in case he hears it, right? Not that he would hear it, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You don't want to go all in on criticising, but you also don't want to sort of patronise and be like, oh, it's okay, buddy.
Well, what I think is what was more disconcerting for me is what happened after the goal, which is I feel like you make the mistake, and this is where, I don't know, this not pot kettle black or whatever, but like if that were me, I would be done. I'd be like, no, sub me out. Like I would be so mad at myself.
I see.
But I am not an international goalkeeper, and I feel like when you are, it's your job to be like, look, okay, I made a mistake. I'm going to make up for it. I'm going to have a solid game. And maybe 10 minutes later, I think it is, he basically makes a very bad pass that puts Portugal in a 3v1 or 3v2 situation because he tries to be clever and play a 30-yard pass.
Yeah.
And that's where...
He just couldn't make the save on that, though.
That's great.
Maybe he was just setting himself up to have a
I would say the
save.
shot was right at him. So even then, because it wasn't like he never had the opportunity to make like a really good save. I guess he has one where he kind of comes out and punches the ball away but doesn't take the player's legs because it could have easily been a penalty.
He actually did, apart from that moment you're talking about, which I agree was a terrible pass and a bad idea and speaks to a nervy moment. Everything else was solid after that, right?
I mean, what do you mean everything else? Like, he makes that save after he gives the ball away.
Yeah.
He has that one I mentioned. What else can you remember?
He caught the next couple crosses.
Did he, or did he juggle that one cross? Because you're forgetting that. Exactly. So there's just those moments where it was like that's why he had like an okay game, except for he made 2 big mistakes, and that means he didn't have an okay game. He had a bad game.
And then the other thing is Bruges were talking about how they dropped him for making a couple of recent mistakes, and they were hoping that he'd go on international duty, come back with more confidence.
Yep.
Instead, he's going back to Bruges with that gif.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? That's going to follow him back there, and he's going to walk in the door, and the goalkeeper coach will be like, "Hey, we got to talk about this."
And so
in Flemish, he'll say it. I don't know.
Sure,
probably in English.
Probably in English. But I don't want to keep harping on him because obviously we all know it was a bad goal to give up. But I'll say this, as like much of a bummer as it is, it's going to be a long time before people forget that.
Yeah.
Because especially with international duty, The United States doesn't have competitive games. They're going to have some friendlies, but it's still going to be
He
the
won't
thing.
be in January camp, will he? Because he's a European-based player. The next time he has a chance to play for the US is March 2018.
But you go back to like David De Gea when he first played for Man United and conceded a couple goals from distance. Not that many, but that became the narrative for the first like half of that season. Was like, shoot from distance, he can't handle it.
Yeah.
And it takes a really long time for that reputation to go away, and you've got to earn it. And so that's all he can do is go back, try to earn that starting spot back at Bruges when he plays for the United States again, because he will. Have a better game. Remind everybody, this is why we all were excited to see him in the first place.
Yeah, so this is maybe the one sort of, not consolation, but the one part where we don't have to be all in on criticising him is, yes, terrible mistake. He's in a bad moment. He hasn't helped himself here. But from what we've seen of him, he is still a quality goalkeeper who's in a bad moment. And over the long span, we can expect that Ethan Horvath comes back from this and can establish himself as the US goalkeeper in the future. It's just no one will mark this as the start of when he became the number one.
No, I don't think so.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think they'll mark this as the start of when
Bill
the
Hamid
competition
became
remained
number
open for who is going to be the future number one of the United States.
One more thing on this goal.
Sure.
I want to say DeAndre Yedlin, not at fault at all. I feel
Nor
like
Tyler
Yedlin,
Adams, because we kind of talked about how they were both sometimes out of position and trying to lock down that right side.
But Adams had drifted centrally, but only because I think there was a gap that he was trying to fill, and then he'd come back out
That's
to
the
the
key
right.
thing.
Yeah.
As soon as he recognized that somebody had picked up the man that he tracked into the middle, he starts drifting back over. It's just he gets into a space where he is marking, I think, Portugal's left midfielder or doing enough to contain him from a long ball. But the left back has come forward, and that's where suddenly that left back is on the touchline. That long ball, even if Adams is in a decent position to cover his man, it's still 20 yards away from where the guy actually gets the ball.
And I would say Yedlin with, I keep forgetting his name, it is Antunes. Yedlin with Antunes.
Altoona.
He kind of...
Dave Altoona.
He kind of forces Antunes into a not great cross, essentially, right? And it just happens it's Horvath's mistake that makes it a goal. And I think that's kind of... what's the word? An example of what Yedlin was doing all night, which was every time, especially Bruma, when Bruma would run at him. Remember, we were scared of Bruma in the preview because he's very fast, very tricky, very smart. Yedlin did a great job of just kind of standing him up, having really good body shape and defensive position, and not giving him an opportunity. And Bruma's someone who could kind of match Yedlin pace for pace.
Yeah.
And so it was all about sort of who had the smartest defensive positioning.
Yeah.
Yedlin did a really good job of it in a way that makes me feel more and more secure about DeAndre Yedlin, defender.
I agree, and I'll say that especially because in the second half, I can't remember if it was Geddes or Martins or maybe somebody who came in, but they basically had a 1v1 with Yedlin where they were dribbling into the box, and it would have been easy for Yedlin to get beat because suddenly your back's to goal, you don't want to make a mistake, so you're a little bit hesitant. It would have been easy for him to concede a penalty. Instead, he just keeps his footing, keeps shuffling, and then sticks the ball basically and comes away with it. And it's just really, really, really good defending in a very tight space when it had to be perfect. It was.
It makes me sad that Yedlin won't be at the World Cup to sort of show everybody
Why would you take us
what
back
he's
to that?
made of.
Why would you do this to us? I'm sure Newcastle's pretty pleased that he won't be at the World Cup.
That's true. He'll get a nice rest this summer. Yeah.
And won't get all the international attention of like, hey, pacey right back who can do stuff. Maybe we want him.
All right, so we've got a bit more to talk about with US-Portugal. We got some Bruce Arena on Fox Sports 1 to talk about. But first, today's show is sponsored by Squarespace.
Yep.
Squarespace, you'll remember I was very excited that they are now sponsors of the Total Soccer Show. Squarespace will host your website and help you design your website. It's a very easy user interface.
Is that why
I can do it?
I was going to say, is that why you're excited because you thought maybe they'll give you even more attention than they already do now that they're a sponsor? Or was it just because you like what they've done for us and you want everyone to know about it?
Well, the reason I'm excited is because it's kind of some big name shows are sponsored by Squarespace. So I kind of feel like we're getting towards that level when we have Squarespace as a sponsor.
Sure.
But also it's a product that we genuinely use. TotalSoccerShow.com is based on Squarespace.
Do you have some sort of like
league
benchmark?
table?
Is there a sponsor that's when you know?
Maybe.
We're going to talk about this off air. I really want to know who it is.
It's not the one that speaks ill of the U.S. Postal Service.
Okay, that's good. I think it was Pod Save America was like, we have to tone down how to... Oh, no, it was Comedy Bang Bang. Scott Aukerman said on his show, like, I have to tone down how bad I talk about the post office. So I feel like that was the post office saying to Stamps.com, hey, guys, same thing happening here. Calm it down. Anyway, back to Squarespace.
Squarespace, yeah. So TotalSoccerShow.com, which we've got very many compliments on, is based on, it's hosted by, it's designed with Squarespace.
Yep.
That's how we log in. That's who does it all for us.
And I'm gonna jump in because you did a lot of the design work on this one. You kind of figured some stuff out because we'd used other hosting sites and other web builders, site builders in the past, and they had lots of bugs occasionally and ran into some issues. I really appreciated how easy it's made everything we've done, as we talked about before. Scouting network, getting people to sign up for the scouting network, getting people to buy merchandise has also become a much more streamlined process. It has definitely helped us operate more as a business, and that is useful in terms of income.
I also sleep better at night knowing that sort of the design isn't going to go out of whack, and I'll be checking the website in the morning and something's changed and it's all looking a bit weird. That hasn't happened so far. I don't expect it to happen again because Squarespace has a team working behind the scenes to keep everything up to date. I love it.
That certainly makes life easier. I'm glad you're able to sleep at night, Daryl.
I'm not the only one because
you're not the only one sleeping at night.
After our first ad read, some people took us up on the offer to switch to squarespace.com to make Squarespace their host.
Yep.
We heard from John at 574 Soccer Academy. The URL is fsfsocceracademy.com. It was redesigned using Squarespace. It looks beautiful.
It does.
It maybe looks better than our website.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
But it looks good. fsfsocceracademy.com looks really good. Thank you to John for emailing to let us know that you used Squarespace. I would encourage people to go visit. I'll put the URL to 574 Soccer Academy in the show notes.
And if people want to use Squarespace for themselves, Daryl Grove, what can they do?
Yes, well, it's the time, right? It's, as you saw, it's the beginning of the new cycle of US soccer. And if you want to make a website to celebrate what's happening next with US soccer, you can head to squarespace.com for a free trial. So you can really get to look at the system and see how it works. And then when you're ready to launch, you use the offer code TSS, easy to remember, TSS. You'll get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain with squarespace.com.
There we go. I'm going to assume that a link to Squarespace will also be in the show notes, Daryl Grove?
It will now.
There we are.
It will now, thanks to your reminder.
And again, that's TSS at checkout, 10% off. Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's program. Now that we've talked about happy things, shall we talk about annoying things?
So I couldn't.
You're tapping that pen.
I'm trying to think of a good way to introduce this. Like when it was announced that Bruce Arena was going to be a studio analyst for this game on Fox Sports 1,
I was instantly angry.
That was the reaction everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think it's the correct action. I am not sure why Bruce Arena thought this was a good idea. I'm not sure why Fox Sports thought this was a good idea.
I'm not sure anybody in the end did think it was a good idea. That's the way it felt. It felt
Did it feel tense in the studio? Rob Stone, Lexi Lalas, and Bruce Arena didn't know what to do with his hands the whole time.
It was definitely a Ricky Bobby, what I do with my hands sort of moment. And I didn't notice it. You noticed it at first. And by the end of the halftime segment, we were both just staring at Bruce Arena's hands as he awkwardly shuffled papers and then sort of stabbed himself with a pencil.
Tried to do a clasp and then decided against it and switched it around, and it was rough.
This is going to be a long reference, so I apologize. But the and then there were fewer sort of murder mystery novels in which everyone shows up in one location and then slowly
people keep disappearing.
But it's more how did you got invited? Who invited you? And it's suddenly they've all been brought there under false pretenses. I feel like that's what happened in this studio. It's nobody actually said we really want this to happen. Everybody just was told to show up. And then it was wait, what? This wasn't your idea? This wasn't your idea? This wasn't my idea. And suddenly everyone's there and they've got to do the best they can.
And so they didn't really address
it was the butler the whole time.
They didn't address the elephant in the room until the post-match analysis, right? And it was essentially...
And even then, I wouldn't necessarily say they did, but yes, go ahead.
I can't remember. Alexia Lalas asked it in the end. Basically, it was essentially asking what happened.
I think he said in retrospect, I think he framed it as
would you have done anything differently
with the roster you saw tonight and the way this result went. Looking back on some of the mistakes, would you have done anything differently? And I think that's what frustrated me the most. Is if you want to have Bruce Arena in there, I'm not going to say fine. I'm going to say if that's what you want to do it. But it just felt like, if you guys are going to have him there, then you've got to deal with that stuff right away. And I kind of assumed they had in the pregame show because we didn't watch that. But then
I would say, based on the elevation of Rob Stone's shoulders, that they hadn't dealt with it. You could see the tension in the room.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I saw referenced a lot was that he had said something like, "Who would you have who on this roster would you have maybe included if you were still in charge?" And he mentioned that Miazga and Brooks might have been our starters at the World Cup, and that maybe McKinney would have gotten called in too. I think, but I felt really frustrated because in regards to the what mistakes were there. the way Bruce Arena responded, it felt like somebody who had had their lawyer review the statement to make sure they didn't make any comments that could be perceived as guilty. Because it was sort of well, there are two games that people think were the ones that went wrong, and it was Costa Rica and Trinidad, and some people think that this should have happened. And then some people think the opposite in that game. So you tell me. And it just felt very and he also made fun of his phone and whatever.
To recap it, the experts, right?
Yeah.
If people haven't seen it, he essentially said that he felt that there were too many changes made between the Gold Cup victory and the game against Costa Rica, the home game that we lost 2-0. And then he tried to do the opposite thing where he kept the same team that played Panama to go out against Trinidad.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, those were both mistakes, right? But he's essentially saying because those are two different scenarios, that neither was wrong because he did them both.
Or your criticism. I think what he was really trying to say is your criticism is invalid. Yeah. Because I made changes, it made you mad. I didn't make changes, it made you mad. You were just going to be mad. And that is wildly missing the point of what people were frustrated about.
It is, right?
Not to mention the fact that when he goes to that Costa Rica game, the changes he made, I'm making those in air quotes, you can't see those listeners, is that he talked about, I brought in some European guys and that kind of put it on them. And those European guys were Jeff Cameron, Christian Pulisic, Bobby Wood, Fabian Johnson, and somebody else who I'm forgetting. But it was he brought in the players that we would have expected to be in there starting and challenging, and you wouldn't have any issue with that. And even then, I think that was the game where he put Fabian Johnson at right mid, or maybe he put Jonathan Naby in the middle.
What he did is he played Fabian Johnson, even though Johnson was only just back from injury.
There it is.
That was a mistake.
Yeah. And
let's not get back into that.
I don't want to. I mean, I don't want to go down that road, but I do want to go to it's not as though he brought in a bunch of young players to see what they were capable of, and it went wrong against Costa Rica.
That's what should have happened.
He played his strongest team, and nobody was oh, this Gold Cup roster, that's the one we're going to stick with because it got the job done at the Gold Cup. I mean, so I just feel like that was sort of a very disingenuous way to approach things, and I think what made me so frustrated in that is that, as I said, sorry for going on a ramble here, but I think it's important, at least for me, to get it out there.
All right, get it.
Is that I was frustrated that they were going to have him in this broadcast because I really am still very upset about the United States not going to the World Cup.
You can say it was maybe a chance to properly apologize.
Exactly, and that's what I thought it was.
Could have been a moment, right?
Or even not to have. I understand. You don't owe me an apology. He does. He doesn't. He can say I got some stuff wrong. This should have worked out. Yeah, I didn't really think this was going to be the way it was. It was an opportunity for him to sort of explain what he thinks went wrong or why he made some of the decisions he did. Not to be grilled or in a testimony sort of thing.
Yeah.
And just for it to still be that sort of smug oh, the experts on their cell phones. It's dude, you didn't qualify for the World Cup. Stop acting as though you are this end all be all of soccer who is the expert. It just felt like a missed opportunity at a time when I like Bruce Arena. I would have liked for him to sort of make me like him again, and it did the opposite.
He also kind of
and now my blood pressure is higher.
He kind of dodged Rob Stone's question at the end.
Yes,
and I'd like to talk about this. So this is in relation to Christian Pulisic either wrote or I'm going to assume co-wrote with someone on staff at the Players Tribune.
I'm going to say transcribed over the phone or his thoughts were because there was a lot of you know what I'm saying when it's it was a little
so you can read this at theplayerstribune.com. It's Christian Pulisic talking about sort of the sort of pain that you feel for missing the World Cup, and the title is 1,800 something days, however many days it is until World Cup 2022.
It's changed since then.
Yeah, I'm sure. So you have to update the headline every day.
I hope so. That should be the new clock.
So Pulisic made a lot of points, and this thing has gone kind of viral. To me, the two most interesting things he said were, first of all, that one of the things that really helped his career is that from the ages of 16 to 18, he could already be in Europe with Borussia Dortmund because he has that Croatian passport, and he doesn't have to wait until he's 18 to go and move over there. But then his argument was, and again, Pulisic's 19, right? When you're 19, you only have a limited understanding of politics and how the world works. His suggestion was that maybe US soccer and people should lobby so that young Americans without EU passports should be allowed to go over there early. You essentially talk about changing EU law, right? That's not within US soccer's purview.
No, it's not. And he also kind of he going along with that, he had that point about how people think he isn't as American because he came up in the Dortmund Academy.
I'm not sure anyone's saying that.
I don't think anyone's saying that, but I felt like it was all sort of a way to talk about dual nationals without actually talking about dual nationals. And I kind of wish he had said, and that's why these guys are really important. No, he did not.
But what he then did say is, okay, if people can't move, and this is the part I kind of agree with him on, if young players can't move to Europe, and you see them staying in Major League Soccer, and you know they're super talented, and they're 16, 17, 18, what Pulisic said he's frustrated by is those players then not getting a chance on a Major League Soccer first team and starting 11. And I 100% agree with him on that. And then the big question that was asked in the studio on the back of that, I think Rob Stone asked Bruce Arena, or Alexi Lalas asked Bruce Arena, would you be in favour? It was actually, would you be in favour of some sort of quota type system? I'm not sure how he phrased it, but where MLS teams have to start a certain number of Americans. And I think Arena said that certainly would be an idea.
Well, here's what I have learned from my wife being in law school. Welcome to discount law school. Is that what makes a good prosecutor?
Wait, is discount law school still expensive?
Oh, of course it is. Yeah, discount still means very expensive. It just sounds better because it's a discount, or it sounds cheaper rather. What very good prosecutors and very good defense attorneys do is they ask specific questions that require a specific response. And I think what Alexi might have done was said, so some people think, and sort of phrased it that way, because I'm guessing he himself does not maybe believe that as much. But when you do that, it allows for that's certainly what some people think. And that was the answer he gave. So it didn't really force Arena to actually answer the question. And I think then Rob Stone was like, nothing else you want to say? You sure? Like, he let it linger. I think he let that awkwardness hang.
All right, so I think enough analysis of what happened in the Fox Sports studio.
You sure? Because I'm still pretty angry.
I think you should keep the rest of it to yourself.
You sure? All right.
But I do want to talk about what we think about that idea, because after seeing some really talented American teenagers out there on the field and thinking there's all these other teenagers coming through, like Andrew Carlton next year, he's either going to play for Atlanta or he's going to do nothing, right? Would we be in favour of any sort of system where Major League Soccer enforces or mandates that teams have to play a certain number of American players?
No, but also maybe yes.
Okay. Your answer's slightly better than Bruce Arena's. Only if I can ask you a follow-up question. What are you talking about? What do you mean?
Sure. It's that my initial reaction to that is no. I hate that system. I don't like
the mandates.
Because I think it makes... If anything, it makes Major League Soccer seem even more like weird and like bureaucratic and out there, and it's another hurdle that you have to navigate or obstacle that you have to overcome. I think that's the better metaphor. And so on the surface, no, I don't like that. And I think it also creates problems about, like, do you have to have a certain number in the starting 11? Do you have to have a certain number in the game day roster? Whatever, questions like that arise. But then on the other hand, I do think it would make more Americans get to play in a time where they need to be playing, and it would force clubs to give those youngsters a chance.
But the worry I have is that you'd have a situation where, like, say that you mandate that 4 American players have to start.
Yeah.
Everyone would kind of know that the fourth pick American, who is maybe not as good as the Argentinian that's sitting on the bench. There'd be this weird thing where you maybe don't deserve your spot in the starting 11 on merit, and that's going to cause trouble within a team and almost will damage that player's reputation among fans. And I think you can get in some really tricky situations.
Well, you can, but I think then the argument to that would be, well, then don't have 4. Have on a 25-person roster, have 12 players or 15 Americans.
So on a roster rather than in the starting 11.
Yeah, but
I think that's the better way to do it, is to make sure the roster makeup is.
Well, no, but my point is simply that then, so if you do have that situation in which we've got the 3 that always start, but this guy's down, like, and we don't have another option, so we have to put an American here. But if you have more American depth, then you can kind of adjust your roster accordingly versus like, we've got 5 guys and 2 of them are injured, we're in trouble. Like, so I think that's one way you deal with it. I just still have an issue with limiting the amount of freedom that teams have to operate that they want to operate. But then again, it's Major League Soccer, where there's already a lot of obstacles put in place to not allow teams to operate the way some would maybe like to.
I think the thing because we kind of talked about this off air, right? Didn't we come up with an idea that essentially the best way to do it was some sort of luxury tax type situation, where you make sort of the salaries of American players. There's no tax on that, but you sort of have to pay a luxury tax for foreign players. So you sort of disincentivize having non-American players on your roster in a way that encourages you to look locally or at least look American.
Or at least you incentivize the teams that don't go out and spend a bunch of money to say, well, look, you guys didn't do that, but you did sign this young American. Here's an extra amount of money from the team that went out and signed. Just off the top of my head, say Yaya Toure. Just throwing that out there. Because I think what I've seen a lot, and with the Columbus debate as well about what's happening there, I feel like the kind of counter to the Columbus resistance has become, well, it's capitalism. It's a free market. Stop trying to interfere in that. And I would say that in this situation...
For one, that's not an answer to anything.
No, it's not.
Right?
But also in this situation, I feel like people will say that again, that it's like you can't really tell teams how to operate, like to make them have to play certain players and not other players. That goes against the system. But I think that is still born of like American sports assuming that they are the best. And if Manu Ginobili is playing in the NBA, it's because he is so good that he can compete with other NBA players, and that's why he deserves to be there.
I don't know who he is, but okay.
He's an Argentinian who plays for, I think still does. It's been a while since I've watched the NBA. But my point is simply that in every other sport, really, if
you're
here,
you're
the
best.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, baseball, basketball, football, hockey, whatever you want to go with, you're getting the best of the best.
If there's an amazing Croatian wide receiver, he's going to end up in the NFL. I know that's not an example that's actually
ever happened, but now I'm curious.
Saying if there was some Croatian-born who was just like super fast and really good at catching and all the other attributes, the ultimate thing he could do is play in the NFL.
Yeah, and so that is the sort of you are already the best, and therefore you can afford to spend or not spend on the best depending on what you want to do. Major League Soccer is not the best league in the world. It is a league that is okay at developing players and has some really exciting players and could probably do a lot more, but it does then leave itself open to I can't really make it with my League One squad in England, but this team needs a player, so I'll go there and maybe get into the starting 11. And
you talking about Bradley Wright Phillips?
Well, he was League Two. I wasn't even going to go that far, but I'm just saying,
he wasn't League Two.
Wasn't he? I think he was. Maybe that was Wayne Rooney's brother. I can't remember.
Yeah,
but
John Rooney. Yeah.
My point is simply that I think MLS isn't at that standard where it is sort of, it weeds out some of the like similar competition. And so I still think it's fine to bring in really exciting young players who are going to do a lot. Look at what Atlanta United did with some of their DPs. I think it's okay to bring in more proven veterans like Seattle did with Nico Lodeiro.
But then how much room do you leave for the next generation of Tyler Adams?
I think plenty, because you're talking about specific players. But when you start always looking to, other countries around the world without naming names, without naming specific clubs, I think to look at like how you fill out like roster spots 8 through 17, that's where you're looking to sign people that could absolutely be young Americans getting those minutes instead.
Okay,
does that make sense?
Yes, you want like the high profile or talented foreigners to be the headliners, and you want Americans on the rest of the roster.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. I think that's kind of a plan.
Yeah.
But then you've got to enforce that in some way. And maybe a luxury tax idea does it?
Yeah, maybe. But this is also why we're not in charge of Major League Soccer or U.S. Soccer.
Not yet. Not yet.
Co-presidents.
Anything else you want to talk about before we do scouting? Anything specifically about the US-Portugal game? Was there anything left unsaid about that?
Maybe not specifically from this game, but from what we're going to see in the future and what we see going forward from the U.S. national team.
I guess, part of this is that we were impressed with what we saw. I think I argued this many minutes ago at the start of the show that this is the style I want the US to play. Right? This doesn't have to be 4-1-4-1, doesn't have to be the formation, but sensibly going after the ball with tenacity, winning it back, and then going at a team is the way I think the US should play. So to see them doing that has me excited. But then in the back of my mind, Dave Sarakin's the acting head coach. He's not going to be the permanent head coach. We may get someone else entirely all together. So it's hard to know what to think of the future, isn't it? I guess the future's still up in the air because we still may get an interim head coach appointed and we still may then get a permanent head coach appointed in late 2018. But in the books, we have a January game. January 28th, USA versus Bosnia-Herzegovina, and a January camp that goes with that. And I can't decide how to be excited about that or not because Weston McKennie can't be there. He's going to be with Schalke. It's going to be MLS players, right?
All right. We haven't talked about this, but I'm going to give you my thought, which is that I think I would very much like to see a permanent manager appointed for that January camp.
Permanent, like you're the guy presumably till 2022?
Because I know the conventional wisdom is wait till after the World Cup, see what happens, see how things shake out. But really what happens at the World Cup, when we talk about this with players all the time, is that one player catches fire, has a good tournament, scores a couple goals, suddenly his price tag goes from $20 million to $80 million or whatever it is now.
So you're seeing the same thing happen with the coach maybe?
I could definitely see that. And we've also seen like national teams catch fire because they've got a golden generation or a specific batch of players that suit that manager style. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to correlate to what the United States is trying to do. And I feel like I'd rather kind of have, like, okay, we've got this sorted. We've got a manager in place now. I guess I'd be okay with an interim manager if it made sense, but I think I wouldn't mind seeing somebody brought in on a permanent basis in January. And I have my ideas about who I would like them to be.
The
They're
coach is
similarly named, is what I'm going to say.
Ventura's available.
I'll pass. Michael O'Neill, Martin O'Neill.
Okay, yeah. So this was a really weird experience yesterday.
You talked me into Martin O'Neill. I get confused.
So I talked about Martin O'Neill on the last show. Ireland are now out, right?
Yep.
Denmark smashed them 5-1.
Yeah, maybe I'm less inclined to have him now.
Well, I mean, just on one game, right? Yeah. So Martin O'Neill, I think, would be a good sort of defensive coach for the US. But then the rumour this morning was Michael O'Neill, the Northern Ireland manager, the similarly named Northern Ireland manager. The rumour seems to stem from an Ian Darke tweet with Ian Darke saying reports or rumours today that the US is interested in Michael O'Neill. And I honestly think Ian Darke might have got confused.
You think?
Because I read a Guardian story that said that Michael O'Neill was thinking of leaving Northern Ireland. He may take the Scotland job, or he may be looking for jobs in MLS.
Really?
Because he was at Portland Timbers for a little while.
So really? Michael O'Neill? Because I also heard him linked with Everton as well. That's the other one I've seen.
Okay, so maybe that's in there as well. But I think there may have been a thing where he was linked with MLS teams because he has some MLS history, and Ian Darke has kind of misconstrued that.
I see.
Yeah.
That could well be. It makes sense to me, and I think especially given what you were talking about previously, which is that this was the first time when we were sort of like, oh, this is clearly what they're doing, and it's working. And I feel like what the United States needs is somebody who can keep them organized, rigidly defensive, and then also maybe set them free at times and let them do stuff from an attacking standpoint. But certainly, we just saw that discipline today. And I know I began this by saying I don't know if I give Dave Sarachan the credit. Maybe I will for purposes of this conversation.
They look really organized against a really talented Portugal team.
Yeah. And so I just feel like maybe somebody who can keep a team organized and kind of keep them all with the same goals in mind and the same approach in mind is somebody I wouldn't mind seeing made permanent manager.
Dave Sarachan?
No.
Tab Ramos?
You want to know why I say no to Dave Sarachan?
Yes.
I have no personal bias against him. It's because every time I saw a shot of that bench, it made me angry. Because it was all the same faces from Bruce Arena.
Literally Bruce Arena's son, right?
It was. I mean, it was
Kenny Arena.
It was literally, it was all of his assistants except for Bruce Arena wasn't there.
Yeah.
And to the extent that like some of the questions he was asked in the pre-match and post-match stuff seemed to be sort of like, what would you be doing today? What do you think they're going to... It was a lot of like, these are your people, so what are they going to do? Like, it felt like still an arena squad, and I think you have to distance yourself from that because people are going to be angry about that for a long time.
All right, so US gets put to bed until January when we get the January call-ups, probably from MLS, maybe a little Liga MX.
Yes, except because I know we need to move on from this, but there's one thing that we haven't talked about. We can do it briefly. I'll let you have maybe a momentary rant of your own.
What's that?
They ended the post-game coverage. Or no, excuse me, they ended the halftime coverage.
I deliberately didn't want to talk about this, but we're doing it now. Okay.
But they mentioned the soccer NIT, basically, is what we and some people on Twitter have started calling it. But it's basically the idea that so many teams are going to be out of the World Cup this time around that there are theoretically rumors, stories, whatever, that U.S. soccer is looking into it.
Okay, first of all, there are not rumors.
Nope.
There are just a bunch of people tweeting, mostly in a joking way, and some people taking it seriously.
Correct.
Right? So this is basically just, I tweeted this yesterday because I was sick of seeing this online. You don't want this. You do not want this to happen. You do not want to watch a sad, what did I call it, the Losers United DNQ tournament next summer. Even if you get to the US, Italy, Chile, Netherlands, Ivory Coast or whatever, you don't want this. It'll just make you sadder because it will be a pale, pale, pale shadow of the World Cup. Second of all, I think people have forgotten how focused everybody is on the World Cup when the World Cup is coming. Like the month build-up is all about the World Cup. And it's not just about your team. It's about all the other teams, right? So there's no need to have another tournament to try and take eyes away from that to watch some weird, sad tournament of teams playing against each other that didn't make it. Third thing is, the best thing the US could do is spend late May, early June playing against teams that have qualified for the World Cup. If you just want like McKennie, Adams, all those guys to get good experience for the US national team, go play England, go play France, go play teams that have qualified for the World Cup. Tour around Europe and play those teams in their send-off series. That would be a good challenge. It'd be much better than playing against a sort of half-motivated, half-arsed Italy or Netherlands team.
Okay. There we go. Daryl's rant.
End rant.
I don't agree with most of what you said.
But no, so why not?
Because first of all, I've seen that argument. Like, I don't think there's much of a difference between playing a team that is in like the lead up to the World Cup. They're not going to be playing 100%. They're going to be resting some players. They're going to be rotating some people because they want to see different combinations.
There'll be some people trying to prove that they should start,
right?
Well. And they'll be trying to get sharp ready for the World Cup,
right?
Yeah.
But I don't think that means you're playing Portugal in a World Cup. You're playing Portugal getting ready for a World Cup.
That's
or
true.
You're playing Germany getting ready for a World Cup. So you're not going to have that like strongest squad. And with that in mind, I don't see that much.
It'll be their strongest squad. The team, the roster that you'll be facing will be their 23-man World Cup.
You're not
roster.
going to be playing their strongest starting 11.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
And on top of that, I don't think that there's that big of a difference between some of the teams that aren't going to the World Cup and some of the ones that are. So I would say playing Italy in a friendly in the United States is probably better for the United States than playing Saudi Arabia, is my point. So you've got that to think about. I would also say that a lot of this is born, I think, of this is. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I would say a lot of this is born of insecurity and kind of fear about not being in the World Cup, because for so many people, the United States has always been in the World Cup. So everything you're talking about...
You can't win this NIT tournament and anyone will be like, wow, you did really well. We're going to let you in the World Cup anyway. But we're going to have a 33-team World Cup.
Fair, but that's not my point. My point is that all of what you're talking about the enthusiasm and the excitement for the World Cup is born of the United States being in the World Cup. That's what I've seen, but that's because I've lived here. If the United States isn't there, I don't know if you have that level of enthusiasm. I just don't know if there is that, like, oh man, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. I don't think you have that sort of countdown clock.
Non-soccer fans won't be as excited. But
I think a lot of soccer fans won't be as excited. I certainly will not be as excited about this World Cup as I would have been if the United States was there. I mean, that's...
true. Same for me. But I got some news for you. You're going to be watching every game with me.
I mean, that is definitely true. But my point is simply that I don't know if I agree with you that everybody's going to be super hyper-focused on the World Cup this time around. I think a lot of people will be, but not to the extent that they would have been, certainly. So I do then wonder if you have the United States playing in a tournament with Chile, the Netherlands, and Italy, if those games sell out because people want to see the U.S. playing. And I think that might be enough.
That's one possible reason to do it, but I still think there are too many reasons not to. The other reasons being that Chile, Netherlands, Italy will pick very weak teams, or
mostly mass retirements probably
will not be interested in doing this because probably the only silver lining of missing the World Cup is that you kind of get the summer off for your players and you get to rest the legs. Like Christian Pulisic will be refreshed going into the 2018-19 season because he won't play in the summer of 2018, right? It's not a very good silver lining, but it's the only one you've got. So Italy, Netherlands, Chile will not want to put extra pressure on their already overworked players. No other nation is interested in doing this. This is the main reason not to do it. And I think it might be just that thing of missing the World Cup for the first time and it's kind of a shock in the US and we want to do something about it. No one else wants to do anything about it. Everyone else just wants to take the summer off, play some send-off series for other countries, and then hit reset on July 2016, 2018, and then we can start the next cycle.
I think a lot of federations enjoy money. And I think they're fully aware that if they sent their teams here, those stadiums would probably sell out. They'd probably be able to make some money.
That's the best argument for doing it.
But I think what I would add is like what Rob Stone ended up talking about was like, you guys free in like May and April next year, or May, like I think he said April and May, like in 2018, we could cover it. Yeah, that's still the league. Like the domestic competitions are still happening, and that is really, I think, the biggest obstacle is that you probably don't do it during the World Cup, as it seems to be the conventional wisdom. So you then have to do it before, but after the season ends in May, if you make it to the Champions League final late May, then you're looking at like what they go straight from their club into this tournament. No one's going to do that for a voluntary tournament. So I think that's where it really does fall apart because you're not going to get enough time for players to be rested going into it. So you're going to have a lot of people say, no, I'm not going to do this. It's going to end up with like your C teams probably coming in.
Yep. Okay, and one final point. I'm willing to go full unpopular on this. Lots of other nations have missed the World Cup at some point. No other nation has been sort of arrogant enough to say, well, we're not missing it. We're going to host our own tournament anyway. It's with all the other teams.
See, I completely disagree with that take because I don't think it's arrogance. I think it's insecurity and like fear. I think it's people want this.
That's often what arrogance is.
I mean, maybe, but in this situation, I completely disagree with you. Okay. I don't think it's like we're the best and we deserve to be there, and since we're not, we're going to start our own tournament. It's more so like I think it's embarrassment. I think for a lot of people, it's like I genuinely, I'm not proud of this, but I genuinely, when Italy didn't make it, I was like, we're not the only ones. Like that's another one, and I think that's what I think a lot of people feel is like, see, there's this tournament of all these really good teams that didn't go either. We're not that terrible. Like I don't.
But would that be the point of the tournament? It's like the we're not that terrible. Look who else is here tournament.
I think for some people, I think a lot of the reason why people are excited about this is because it's sort of like, oh, we could still still get a tournament, and there's a bunch of other teams. We're not the only ones. I don't think it's we're the best and we deserve to be there, and since we're not, we're doing our own tournament anyway.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, we got to make up for it somehow. This is just as good, right? This is what we wanted. This is what we wanted all along. Yes, I wanted to buy a house, but I'm happy to live in my 300 square foot condo. Whatever, it's great. It's fine.
All right, well, we'll see what happens. I don't think anything is happening, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
The other part of this is, I did see, speaking of Netherlands and Italy, England announced friendlies with Netherlands and Italy for March 2018.
Why don't you prepare yourselves against the World Cup, Daryl, against teams that are going to be at the World Cup, so you can be strong.
I think it's a smart scheduling. But it reminded me that is a proper FIFA international date. So January 28th against Bosnia, not a FIFA international date, right? So we'll only get the domestic players and whoever's available. March will be the next time you can call up a full US national team to face whoever we end up facing. I wouldn't mind getting a full-time coach appointed for that date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think historically that's where the United States has gone to Europe and played stronger opposition. I wouldn't mind seeing a full-time head coach take a good group of young and old Americans to play in Europe and see what happens.
Okay. Should we put a pin in that for now?
To prepare for the we promise we're almost as good tournament.
Look who else is here, we're not that bad tournament.
Date of tournament TBD. Actually, and that's the final thing. Sorry. I know we make jokes all the time about, if you took the World Cup away from Qatar, you could have it here next weekend. That's how that's not true. You can't do that. So there's no way. That really is the actual thing.
We need 2 weeks at least, right?
Yeah, but I mean, really, to do a tournament, to do the booking, how many places would you want to do it? You want to do it in Levi Stadium in San Francisco? Well, they're probably booked on a bunch of dates. So you're going to have to figure out how to navigate that. That really is the thing, is that there is just no time to plan a major tournament. Part of the reason why the World Cup is not every year.
All right. Shall we move on to the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network? Speaking of the future, I do see from the first 2 names at least on the list are the future of American soccer.
Yes, sir.
We hope.
We hope.
If you've never heard before, Total Soccer Show Scouting Network is our listeners scout exciting young players around the world, send us reports so we can keep tabs on everything that's happening.
Alrighty.
Who's first?
Up first, Andrew Baird scouting Josh Perez, 19-year-old American winger on loan at Livorno from Fiorentina.
I just realised if Perez had done better the last couple of years, this would have been a game he was in, right?
Yeah.
If he'd taken the McKennie path. Yeah, okay.
Well, he hasn't been doing too well, but I believe that's changed.
Okay.
Perez came off the bench and delivered the game-tying assist in Livorno's 1-1 away draw with Monza on Saturday.
All right.
He entered the game as Livorno's 5th substitution and only a minute later received the ball out wide, beat his defender to the end line, and whipped a driven cross into the box, which was headed home by Livorno center forward Daniele Vantaggio to tie the game at 1-1. Manager Andrea Sotil, I forget how you do the double T's. I know double consonants become a different sound. Anyway, he called the performance mature and important and specifically commended his substitutes by name, starting with Josh Perez, for coming in and having an impact on the game.
If you haven't heard or seen Josh Perez, go watch some highlights. He's a really exciting 19-year-old American winger. He really could be a big name for the future.
Yep.
Allora. Ira Jersey is scouting Ashley Sanchez, the 18-year-old American attacker at UCLA.
I just want to warn you, I'm already in rant mode. Don't start alluding to things that'll send me off on further rant modes.
Ira says Ashley Sanchez started and had an assist in UCLA's 3-1 win over UC San Diego in the first round of the NCAA tournament. It was a second assist, which Ira says we should stop calling an MLS assist because high school and college soccer have tracked second assist since at least the 1980s. You're right, Ira, but we're not going to stop.
Don't worry, I edited the next part.
Anyway, Ashley got the MLS assist and UCLA advances to meet Northwestern in the next round.
Hi, Ira. Steve Reinhardt scouting Yuri Tielemans, 20-year-old Belgian midfielder at Monaco. Tielemans started and was subbed at halftime in Belgium's 3-3 friendly draw with Mexico last Friday. Steve notes that he hasn't had a chance to see the footage yet since he made the decision to drive from Arlington to Chincoteague on Saturday along with his kids to watch a rocket getting launched into space.
Oh, he tweeted us the photos, right?
Yeah. He did.
Isn't it pronounced Chincoteague?
I think it's Chincoteague.
All right. Well, one of us is from Virginia and one of us is correct.
Horses,
Todd Ito
horses swim there.
Is scouting. Todd Ito is scouting Takafusa Kubo, the 16-year-old Japanese attacking midfielder for FC Tokyo. If you remember, the most recent update was he got the full-time contract, right? Todd says, on Saturday, Kubo played in FC Tokyo U23's 2-0 victory over Fujeda NYFC in a J-League 3 match. Todd was able to find a box score and a photo gallery from the match, which featured a photo of Kubo celebrating, so at least least there's that.
Hooray, silver linings. David Friedlander scouting Abel Ruiz, 17-year-old Spanish striker for Barcelona B. Abel Ruiz subbed on in the 60th minute of Barcelona B's 2-0 loss at home to Huesca, who are currently top of the table. He's had an up-and-down time since returning from the U17 World Cup, so David is hoping that his most recent 30 minutes will be enough to merit inclusion in Gerard Lopez's next squad, especially since the team hasn't won in 5 matches.
Worth noting, it's a big deal for a 17-year-old to be playing for Barcelona B.
Yeah.
Right? That means you've gone all the way up through the Juvenile and all the other things, up to the team that's just below Barcelona.
You didn't start doing that until you were like 20, right?
Elijah Chappell is scouting Joe Willock, the 18-year-old English central midfielder at Arsenal. Elijah says Joe signed a long-term contract extension with Arsenal earlier this month. So far this season, he's made 5 first-team appearances, all of which came in either the Carabao Cup or the Europa League, which is the Carabao Cup of Europe.
Yep.
Arsene Wenger has decided, right?
Yes. Jose Mourinho would like a word with you, but yeah, sure. Jared Morgenstern scouting Alphonso Davies, 17-year-old Canadian attacking midfielder at Vancouver. Alphonso's season came to an abrupt end after a 2-0 aggregate loss to Seattle in the Western Conference semifinals, also known as the quarterfinals.
MLS quarterfinals?
Yeah. Which he tweeted about in fairly hilarious fashion. Basically, if you go to the tweet, it's just it's like a gif of a baby just falling face first onto the couch and then not moving anymore. That was Alphonso Davies' current mood.
All right.
Fonzie, as he is apparently known, played in only 26 minutes of playoff action, which came after his team conceded the first goal to Clint Dempsey. An honest evaluation of Davies' season would say it was slightly disappointing, especially when you consider his hot start and best 11 performance at the Gold Cup.
All right, but I'm sure Alphonso Davies will be up to more next season.
Still got over 1,000 minutes, which is not bad for a 17-year-old.
Yeah, so Canadian youngsters doing really well in Major League Soccer, right? Matthew Cleveland scouting Daniel Malen, the 18-year-old Dutch forward at Young PSV. Matthew says the Dutch U19s beat Italy U19s 2-1 last Thursday, and Malen was responsible for the winning goal. It sounds like he served a free kick into the box. No one got to it, but it still ended up in the back of the net. Oh well, says Matthew, goals are goals.
True. Very, very true. And I'm sure Daniel Malin will count that one when you look at his end-of-year statistics.
Oh, sure. I mean, Pele counted all of them, right?
Yep.
So thank you
a few more.
Thank you to Andrew, Ira, Steve, Todd, David, Elijah, Jared, and Matthew for today's scouting reports. If you'd like to join the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network, what's the URL, Taylor?
TotalSoccerShow.com/join.
I like the intonation.
HTTP.
So if you sign up at the $10 a month level or higher, we guarantee to answer one question per month when we do our listener question shows. We really appreciate all the support everyone's been sending. Taylor and I were talking about this earlier. Because it's a month since the Trinidad game, we got a lot of support after the Trinidad game.
We did.
And now that's on a monthly recurring basis. Suddenly, we have a happy reminder that our listeners loved us even after that Trinidad disaster.
Yes, except the cynical part of me is like, I think a lot of people, as we talked about then, thought we were saying like, oh, if we don't qualify for the World Cup, we might not be able to keep doing the show. So I think a lot of people wanted to help us and keep us going.
Yeah, I mean, they did.
So now I just feel like, Daryl, you should just start threatening all the time. Like, I stubbed my toe today. I'm not sure I can keep going. I don't know if this is going to work out.
But thank you to everyone.
No way to engender goodwill from the listeners faster.
Thank you to everyone for all the support. A lot of people actually that day signed up as silent scouts, which I feel like we haven't mentioned in a while. That's where you sign up to support us with a sort of monthly contribution, but you don't want to do any of the scouting, which we totally understand, but you do want to support the show. So you still go to the same URL, totalsoccershow.com/join, but click silent scout, and then we won't send you a player to scout, but we will send you many, many thank yous.
Yep. And we'll do it right now. Many, 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 many thank yous.
Many thank yous. Speaking of, Taylor, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Yeah, right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening.
I didn't think about it.
We'll be back in the next 24 hours or so with what we're going to do our did not qualify draft 11. Yeah, so I think that's more fun than hosting a tournament. We're going to host a draft of players who did not qualify for the World Cup.
It reminds me of the wrinkle that we thought should be added, where every team that did qualify should get to choose one player that did not qualify.
Yeah.
And it should be reverse FIFA ranking, so the team that qualified with the worst ranking gets first pick.
That was a great idea, but a logistical nightmare, so we never did it.
Sure.
All right, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.